Thank you. Thank you very much. The main point that I want to develop in a few moments is that there's really two imperatives at the same time when you're talking about economic security. The first is the one that we talk about a lot in gatherings like this, which is the importance of reducing our individual and collective vulnerability to economic coercion and reducing the risk of relying on unreliable partners or supply chains as part of a larger way of strengthening ourselves and our close like-minded partners. The second part is the imperative of doing that without destroying the international trading system, which has generated so many benefits for so many countries and so many people for decades. So that's the point I want to develop. But first, let me thank the organizers for inviting me. It's a real pleasure to be here again in Taiwan and in some small way to be expressing by my own presence my support for Taiwan and the challenges that you're facing. Just as it's a pleasure to be sitting beside my Latvian friend and to visit Riga from time to time, which is important. What matters in the Baltics and what matters on the eastern flank of Europe matters for not just the region, the continent, but the world. And my city where I live, Ottawa, is, I think, about 7,000 kilometers away from Riga, yet Canada has military forces in Latvia leading the NATO battle group as part of the deterrence effort. Why? Because it matters for Canada. And what happens in Taiwan also matters. And that's the kind of clarity, I think, that came through our lunchtime speaker and our previous speaker. Part of that clarity is also being honest with ourselves about the concepts that we're using. And here I come back to economic security, because we're living through a period of enormous transformation, not just in the geopolitical context, not just in the global economy, but in our concepts of economic management. As Minister Pabrik said, he described briefly the old orthodoxy. More openness would lead to more benefits and more peace and to the convergence of societies around a liberal democratic Francis Fukuyama end of history model. Maybe, you know, even if we don't take it to the extent of the Francis Fukuyama thesis, this was a reflection of an orthodoxy that existed basically since from the end of the Second World War until quite recently. And so we are living through right now a moment when the old orthodoxy is going away, but we're not quite sure what the concepts are, the guiding concepts for the next period. As the Italian political theorist Antonio Gramsci once said, the old is dead, but the new is not yet born. And it's in moments like these that we have to be very honest with ourselves, honest about the threats that we face and the interconnectedness and the importance of standing with our partners, but also honest about the potential risks of the strategies that we're pursuing. So on one hand, as I said, economic security is about reducing our individual and collective vulnerability. And it's quite clear that that's something that is on the minds of many leaders in many different countries. We've heard the statistics from the president this morning about the level of trade with China and reducing dependency on China. There are many other countries that are thinking about de-risking their supply chains, and all of that is absolutely necessary right now. And part of that is strengthening partnerships among like-minded countries and partners. And so I'm very pleased to be here at a moment when finally Canada is taking action to strengthen its partnership with Taiwan, having 9 months ago concluded a a FIPA with Taiwan, and I think just 4 months ago, an agreement on technology and science and innovation cooperation, and I hope that that cooperation continues. But the risk is this. The risk is that the desire for economic security undoes so much of what has generated wealth over the past many decades that it creates economic insecurity. We don't have to think back to the extreme example of the 1920s and 30s and the beggar thy neighbor policies of competitive protectionism to realize that that kind of spiral of protectionism serves the interests neither of prosperity nor of peace. So the dilemma that we face collectively and as individual nations is to design policies that simultaneously increase our, reduce our vulnerability, increase our partnerships with like-minded partners, and to do so in a way that's measured. And I'm afraid to say, like so many other interesting problems, there is no magic solution here other than to continually be mindful of the fact that that's a balance that needs to be struck. Canada is trying in its own way to strike this balance. Unlike some other countries, there has not been a big popular backlash in Canada against free trade, which is a good thing, yet. There hasn't been a backlash yet. At the same time, the Canadian government has introduced very recently a number of measures that are meant to address some of these vulnerabilities, including new rules governing foreign direct investment in sensitive sectors and foreign direct investment by state-owned enterprises of certain countries, and new rules governing research in sensitive areas and the like. And one of the areas of particular interest to Canada is critical minerals, of which there is a lot in the ground in Canada. And part of that critical mineral strategy is intended both to get more of those minerals out of the ground in order to be able to feed them into supply chains that run through countries that are reliable partners. And part of it is also meant to be able to support and fuel an industry of batteries and electric vehicles and electric vehicle parts, which contributes not just to economic security, but also to our global goals of addressing climate change. And these kinds of strategies actually create great and interesting opportunities for cooperation. So recently, a Taiwanese company made a very major investment in the Canadian province of British Columbia in a battery plant, which will, when it's completed, produce up to 135 million lithium-ion batteries a year. And it will do that with electricity, which is 100% from renewable sources, because nearly 100% of the electricity in British Columbia is from renewable sources, and that's true for many other Canadian provinces too. Be a great place to put a chip fab, I think. Just saying, I don't know why I said that out loud. So you have this interesting opportunity that comes out of an economic security strategy, which is aligned with an economic development strategy, which is aligned with a climate strategy, which is aligned with a geopolitical strategy of strengthening relationships with key partners. And the opposite is also true. One of the biggest offshore wind projects in Taiwan, the implementing partner is Northland Energy, which is a company based in Toronto. And I'm delighted to think that that's the kind of cooperation that Canada and Taiwan can build upon. As an aside, Northland Energy also runs wind farms in the Baltic Sea. off the coast of Poland, another country that we have a particular geopolitical interest in supporting. Not that those business decisions were made for geopolitical reasons. So let me just conclude by returning to where I started, which is there are ways of achieving economic security that don't necessarily risk undermining what we've built. But we have to be vigilant with ourselves, with our, say, localization requirements. We have to be vigilant with ourselves to say, if there are new restrictions to be established, are they essential? Or are they accomplishing something else? And we have to be vigilant with our partners, because let's be honest, for a country like Canada, we can't think about economic security without thinking about the policies of the United States. And we need the United States to be a leader in economic security, both in the sense of economic security as protection from risk, and in the sense of helping to uphold a system which has generated so many benefits and which was built in the aftermath of a destructive war, which itself had as one of its causes the economic immiseration of a period of rampant protectionism.